Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Nicola Donnelly, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1 Kim Owen. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Private Sidney William Woods and Private Leslie Woods. Their story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand in joining singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind Two Brothers on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Sidney William Woods and Private Leslie Woods. Sidney and Leslie Woods were born at Mountain River in Tasmania, the second and third children born to William and Helen Woods. Sidney was born on the 9th of February 1892, with Leslie following him on the 25th of September 1893. With their 6 siblings and parents, the brothers grew up along the Huon River in southern Tasmania. Both boys attended Luxton School before finding employment as orchard and timber workers in nearby Huonville. As the elder of the 2 brothers, Sidney was the first to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force, signing his attestation papers on the 7th of June 1916. Allotted to the 40th Australian Infantry Battalion with the rank of private, Sidney departed Hobart on the 1st of July 1916 in HMAT Berrima, bound for England. Sidney arrived in England in August 1916 and marched into Lark Hill Camp for further training with the 3rd Training Battalion. He ran into trouble in early September when he was charged with going absent without leave from camp for 3 days. As punishment, Sidney was required to forfeit 4 days of pay and was awarded 2 days of field punishment number 2 by his commanding officer. While Sidney was training in England, both his father William and brother Leslie enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force. William enlisted first on the 10th of August 1916, with Leslie following soon after on the 7th of September. Both William and Leslie were allotted to the 22nd Reinforcements of the 12th Australian Infantry Battalion with the rank of private. They departed Australia together on the 30th of September 1916 in HMAT Palermo, 1 day after Sidney moved to France from England. Sidney arrived at the 1st Australian Divisional Base Depot at Attaloo on the 1st of October. Although his service record suggested he was to reinforce the 12th Battalion, after a fortnight of preparations, he marched out to join the 51st Battalion. Sidney was taken on strength in the field at Saint-Eloi in Belgium on the 16th of October and immediately got into work making improvements on the Allied positions. The 51st Battalion spent the bleak winter of 1916 to 1917 in northern France, alternating between frontline duty and training and labouring behind the lines. Meanwhile, Leslie proceeded overseas from England to France in mid-December 1916 and joined the 12th Battalion around Fricourt in France on the 26th of January 1917. He left his father behind in England. William was hospitalised in early January and ultimately returned to Australia for medical discharge in February 1917. After joining the 12th Battalion, Leslie was quickly thrust into the realities of trench warfare. On the 11th of February, the battalion moved into the front lines in the Somme Valley. While in the line, they faced frequent enemy bombardments and were ultimately forced to push their front line 50 yards forward into no man's land to avoid the worst of the fire. On the 18th of February 1917, a day before the 12th Battalion were relieved from their positions in the front line, Private Leslie Woods was killed in action. He was 24 years old. It is unclear if or when the news of Leslie's death reached Sidney, who was still serving with the 51st Battalion. In late March, he was admitted to the 13th Australian Field Ambulance with scabies and spent a week receiving treatment before returning to duty. Sidney was hospitalised a few weeks later, this time with dermatitis. Having spent 6 weeks recovering at Rouen, Sidney marched into the 4th Australian Divisional Base Depot on the 12th of June. He remained at the depot for 3 months, during which time he was again charged with being absent without leave. Sidney rejoined the 51st Battalion at Halifax Camp on the 30th of September 1917. Shortly after his arrival, the battalion left the camp and travelled to Ypres, where they entered the front line on the 11th of October. On the morning of the 16th of October, Sidney was eating his breakfast when a gas shell hit him. He was immediately rushed to the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance, suffering from gas poisoning and shrapnel wounds to his back and head. Sidney would succumb to his wounds at the dressing station of the 12th Australian Field Ambulance later that day. He was 26 years old. Following his death, Sidney was buried in the Menin Road Military Cemetery at Ypres in Belgium. Leslie was buried 100 kilometres to the southeast in Warrencourt, British Cemetery in northern France. In October 1919, Sidney and Leslie's grieving family inserted memorial notices into the Hobart Mercury. The poem inserted by their sorrowing parents read, "Somewhere in France there are 2 graves, where wildflowers bloom and grasses wave. At the head a wooden cross to mark our 2 dear sons' loss. No pen can write, no tongue can tell the pain that they went through. Someday we hope to meet them, someday we know not when. We'll clasp their hands in a better land and never part again. And when our hearts are sore for you, I seem to hear you say, break not your heart, dear mother, we'll meet on that eternal day." Both Sidney and Leslie's names are listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. Their photographs are displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but 2 of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Sidney William Woods and Private Leslie Woods, who gave their lives for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.